Sixers talk coming your way, thirst quenching like that tall glass of water in the middle of the night. Thank you for downloading our podcast wherever you get your podcast, particularly at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Danny Pommells and the level-headed one, Paul Hudrick, joining us as the always effervescent, well-mannered co-host.
Sure. I guess. Yeah, why not?
Paul, we are here with a special Sixers Talk podcast because we have Mike Tollin, an interview he did with Michael Barkann, the executive producer of The Last Dance. You know, we've been doing these Monday podcasts, and everyone, you're going to enjoy this interview with Mike Tollin, a Havertown, Delco guy, a few, sports movies to his credit, and it's an interesting interview with Michael Barkann. Be sure to tune in for that. So here we are, talking about this Last Dance. I think the overwhelming sentiment was really the posthumous tribute to Kobe was definitely something that people took away from that. Little Laker boy, I think, is what Michael Jordan described him as at one point during the show. That was one of my takeaways, Paul. What is something that stuck out to you from the show?
Yeah, and it was tough it was but it was at the same time both like tough and heartwarming to see him. You know what I mean? Like it was, and even that, like even going back, like when you see David Stern on there, it's a little bit of a similar, obviously not like Kobe, but it's a similar feeling. Just like it's really good to hear their voices and see their faces, but it still stings a little bit,
Yeah, you saw Prince was in there. There's a few people who aren't with us anymore that were in the show. So just thinking back, you just reflect on those. But I definitely feel you on that.
The one thing that's really starting to, and I think it's not even just this documentary, but I think it's even us doing all the interviews we've done, whether it was Coach Lyon or PJ Carlesimo, whoever it's been, all these connections and how people are so intertwined and you don't even realize it. Like when talking about that, like Kobe, Michael Jordan relationship, and not even like, I didn't realize they were as close as they were. And that's, I don't know if you've been watching like the post show stuff after the documentary, but the one thing they said was,
wait, do you mean with SVP and Charles Barkley, or
yes,
or just like all that type stuff? I got
all that. Yeah, so they do like a whole thing, and like I think I can't remember who it might have been. Jackie McMullen who said a lot of people didn't realize that relationship, the Michael Jordan Kobe Bryant relationship, was so tight and they were so close until Michael Jordan spoke at his funeral, and a lot of people didn't realize that they were that close. And you saw how emotional Michael Jordan got because he looked at him as a little brother. So it's just. That was cool to see just in that. And it's funny too to see Michael Jordan go from, like, for lack of a better term, talking so much shit on Kobe to then that's the relationship they got. Because it just shows you, like, he was a competitive dude, but he had respect for certain guys. You could tell Kobe was a guy he just had an awful lot of respect for. Another thing someone pointed out too, man, the respect that Michael had for Charles Barkley. Because there's a lot of guys on this that are his opponents, that are the nemesis throughout this documentary, that he has some very unflattering things to say about. But Charles Barkley,
Clyde Drexler, Isaiah Thomas,
right? All these guys, yeah. He got pissed because he got compared to Clyde Drexler. That's it, just compared to him, and that pissed him off. But like Barkley, like and he said, like, I was a little upset that Barkley won the MVP. Thought maybe I should have won it, but I was gonna win this. But I thought that was really cool, and just, and it also stung a little bit as a Sixers fan growing up, because that was a year after they the Sixers trade. It was that off season. The Sixers traded him. He goes to Phoenix, wins an MVP, goes to the finals, plays loses to Michael Jordan. And it was cool too, like just Charles doing, like when they have Charles in the documentary, him reflecting on, I'm not upset because it was Michael who beat me, because you can't be, because it was just, he was so great. And if you were going to lose to somebody, that was the guy to lose to.
Bro, SVP, with the analogy of analogies, when he's comparing Michael and Tiger Woods, just the fact that so many great golfers like David Duval and Ernie Els and anybody you can name who was around in that Tiger era, like, you just came on in the wrong time. Like these golfers were great, but this guy was just above and beyond any and everything that we had ever seen. And the same with Michael, like, the Houston Rockets wouldn't have probably the 2 titles they had if Mike never left.
I was just going to say, man, shout out to the Houston Rockets, because, like, think about how great this Bulls team was, and they snuck in 2 championships while Michael was playing baseball. You know what I mean? Right. Like, it's just crazy to think about. that they had their shot, they took it, and they nailed it for 2 years until Michael came back.
Yeah, and I don't know, man. I want to keep perspective on all this stuff and not be, this is the era I lived through, and a greater part of it, and so I want to keep perspective on all this stuff. But just looking at Charles, just from last night, just young Charles in that championship run in MVP season. Can we stop the Draymond Green, Charles Barkley? So anybody ever? Can we stop, please? Can we just stop?
We should. Listen, I'm a Draymond guy. I think Draymond's
I like him.
Really freaking
they
good.
They wouldn't have won. But come on, man.
Absolutely. He was the defensive player of the year. He's been a big part of that team, but no. Like Charles Barkley won an MVP and took that. He was the guy who took that. Like, with all due respect to Draymond, it's Steph and Clay and then Draymond. That Phoenix Suns team, it was Barkley. Then maybe like right around here, it's Kevin Johnson. You know what I mean? Like he was the star on that team.
Forget about it.
The best player in the league that season. And then you saw the finals. I don't know if you saw when Barkley was getting interviewed by SVP, and they showed the numbers that Barkley put up in that finals. Ridiculous. It was like 27, 13, and like 5 assists. Like he was really good. Yeah, he was really good in that series, even though they lost. And I thought that was interesting too, just to hear him say like the fact that what he regrets is that his team wasn't ready for the moment in game one.
First game.
Which is it's crazy, and like that just goes to show you how experience, how big that is, and how big that is to already have guys that have been in that moment, been there, done that, and to just be able to get over those feelings, get over those emotions, and just get into it. And then also just how important, it's a 7-game series, but man, every freaking game is important. And we've seen it play out with the Sixers where, that Toronto series,
great point. I was going to relate it back to the Sixers.
Yeah, the game 4, they had them on the ropes and they let them off, and then they wound up losing that series.
And to PJ Carlesimo's point, relating the fact that a guy like Charles Barkley, who had waited and suffered through so much losing to finally get to the championship, and in his mind, he wasn't ready for game 1, even though with the magnitude of the situation, how much it meant to him. And this was the only trip he had to the finals. He didn't know that at the time, but just the fact that the magnanimous moment right there, to think, to Carlesimo's point, that a 23 and 26-year-old and Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid would be ready for that moment. Not that they can't be, but I'm just saying, like, this, a guy like Barkley, who also took solace in the fact that Michael Jordan said the same thing about when they played the Lakers. Like I just wasn't ready for what to expect in that game 1. So, I mean, it really just
no substitute for experience.
Yeah, man. And these young guys trying to, overcome this. So I guess, when you look back, like, credit to the Warriors for being so young and reaching that pinnacle so quickly. But I think getting back to one of your other points, I think what Michael realized when he saw Kobe, and also something we're going to touch on in a couple minutes, Michael Jordan's competitiveness. I mean, with the pitching quarters, with the security people and the whole bit. But I think the thing is that I think what he saw in Kobe was some of him, and his competitiveness maybe pushed that away a little bit, or didn't want to. And then like Kobe's like, nah, I'm still here. I'm still, going to be, looking you in the eye, like, as if you're my peer, like we're equals, even though I know I'm still in my second or third year. I think that Michael realized, like, man, like this dude is the real deal. Like his competitiveness might have like created that friction at first, or, you hear him talking about him in the locker room and maybe kind of disparaging him a little bit, but at the same, it's just his competitive juices starting to flow as the game approaches, that he's like, man, like this dude's going to be coming at me and I'm going to be ready. And this is my team, and we're going against him. And just that camaraderie, even though he was so close to so many guys on the opposing team, even when you saw, there was a moment when Magic Johnson just came in just to say, have a good game. Like, what you doing in here? Like, you're supposed to be in
this Lakers MFer, yeah.
Right. Like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I'm just coming to say good game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I think it goes back, too, with something with Michael where it was almost like he tried everybody first. You know what I mean? Like he wanted to mess with them first, try to get in their head, see how they would react. And then from there, that would determine how he kind of felt about them. Because, like, you saw it with Kobe, because, like, talking trash to Kobe and all that. And then and other guys around, you saw it, like, the total Tony Kukoc thing. Like, at first, they played Croatia and they just demoralized him purposely. Like they went after him and Scotty went after Tony Kukoc. Then the next game, Tony Kukoc played better, and Michael's like, all right. And I think it was Wilbon said, like, when you talk to
it was the
Michael,
Olympic gold medal game, right?
Yeah, when Michael talked
the second game.
Yes, the championship, yeah. So when Michael talked after that game in the locker room, said, like, actually, you know what? This guy's pretty good. I think he can play. So I think that was his way of gauging people, would be like, I'm going to basically demoralize you and humiliate you and see how you react to it. And how you react to it, that's how I'm going to feel about you. Because even, like, think about, like, the Allen Iverson stories that, like, he tells. I think Allen Iverson said they first met, he called him a little bitch. But then as it, Iverson took it because he knows, all right, what am I going to say? It's Michael Jordan. So he took it, and then a couple months later he crossed him over. So I'm sure that started their, like, mutual respect with each other and all that. So I just think that was his way. I think that was how he how he went about, like, getting to know people in a way.
Is that leadership though? What is that?
What?
Like, give me some perspective, because it's like I don't know. You break people, tear people down and then build them back up, I guess. But when you hear people talk about him, how about this example of the betting on the plane, where Michael's in the back betting thousands per hand on cards. BJ Armstrong, Will Purdue, and the guys are in the front of the plane playing $1 per hand. But here's Michael leaving his $1,000 a game hand just to be in the front playing these guys in the $1 per hand game, just so he can say he has their money in his pocket. You know what I'm saying? I guess that the leadership thing is just, I'm like, well, I guess he leads by example, because it's like he's dominating every opponent and you see that and then you try to follow suit.
Well, and I think an important thing in this part of this documentary, it was a lot psychologically to kind of unravel, right? Because of him with the gambling stuff and, being an AC before the playoff game in New York because his dad told him he wanted him to get away from basketball. It's a lot of, none of us are perfect. You know what I mean? And no, honestly, Danny, is that the best way to lead? No, it's probably not the best way to lead. But for him, it was the best way for him to see who was on his level. Like when he's antagonizing Scotty Burrell, it's to say, like, all right, Scotty, you're a young guy. You want to be like, if you want to contribute to this team, you want to be on my level, you're going to have to get on my level. And you know what I mean? Like, I think that's how he saw it. I don't think he saw it as, and it's again, we can't look at it as, because he wasn't perfect. And that's the big thing I'm taking away is a lot of this is him recognizing his flaws and recognizing where maybe he made mistakes and recognizing where maybe he could have been better. And I mean, some of it's him not admitting that too, but and I think that's a big part of it is that, he wasn't the perfect teammate. And, that book, the Jordan Rules book that came out that kind of painted a picture of him not being the greatest teammate in the world, well, might have not been that factually inaccurate because there was a lot of guys that he rubbed the wrong way. But I also think, look at Kobe. There was a lot of guys that Kobe rubbed the wrong way. Some of these great players, even Allen Iverson, there's a lot of guys that are this great and that are just driven so hard by this and this one goal. They don't consider all that peripheral stuff, and all they're focused on is winning and whatever they have to do to do that. So is that the best way to lead? Maybe not, but it might be the best way to win an NBA championship.
I think the fact, if you've heard both of these quotes, each attributed to Jordan and Kobe, one from Shaq, where Shaq said that he tried to tell Kobe to pass the ball more. And he said, well, Kobe, there's no I in team. And Kobe said, well, there's a me in that month. You know what I'm saying? And then Mike was quoted as saying, he said, someone told him there's no I in team. And he said, well, there's I in win. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like that mentality of like all or nothing. Definitely, I think can inspire people. I think the thing with Mike is like the competitiveness, man. Like he had to try you, like you said, to see, where he could like position you, where he could compartmentalize you. I think that when you look at the progression of like what he went through to where he was, all that Detroit Pistons and, all those wars he went through probably is what conditioned him to be like so over the top with that competitiveness when it came to his teammates. You know what I'm saying? Because he felt like, if you can't help me be my greatest, then I don't need you, type of thing, I guess. I don't know, but you see it come out in every way, shape, or form. Like I mentioned with the airplane, card game, where he left his expensive game to go play in their dollar per hand game just so he could take their money. And then like he's pitching quarters with, the guy with the blonde curly hair, which is such an interesting character.
Yeah, that guy. We need more. We need more on that fella. I need to know his life story. I need more.
Oh man, so he's betting with the security beforehand. It just indicative of the man, and the trip to Atlantic City, as you mentioned. It just took me back to like a moment in time that was just so surreal in so many ways, because you had Michael Jordan, who had this perfect persona, not because he was perfect, but because that's how like Madison Avenue and like the Gatorade and Nike like portrayed him, because they were trying to sell sneakers and products. But when you peel back the layers, you see that Michael was so intense in so many ways.
Yeah, and I just look at that whole thing and like him missing the play, like again him going to AC before the playoff game, and how much that got blown into a huge big deal.
Down 0-2.
And yes, down 0-2.
Down 0-2.
Yeah. So I and it's funny because there was this sentiment, this whole thing, and again, it's like almost like a case study type of deal with like him versus the media, and how basically it seems like part of the reason he winds up leaving basketball to play baseball. I mean, they're going to get to that, but is because he was so worn down from having his private life, scrutinized so much, and by the media asking so many questions about it. It seemed like to me at least, it seemed like it just wore him down to the point where he just didn't want to do it anymore. And it's such an interesting dynamic, because as media, we have a job to do. You know what I mean? Like it's not our job to tear people down or to, but it's our job to reveal the truth. And,
peel back the layers. Yeah.
Right. And the reality was, he said, I have a competitive problem. I don't have a gambling problem. Mm-hmm. While he's doing an interview in sunglasses indoors, that's a whole other thing with a modern shop. But yeah, just that whole thing. And just, I think about, because there's all this talk about guys in different eras, yada, yada, yada. Listen, Michael Jordan, to me, would have been great in any era. It doesn't matter. You could have thrown him anywhere. He would have been great. Doesn't matter. But I wonder how well he would have handled all of this social media ultra scrutiny. Like, I look at LeBron James, and you could say whatever you want about LeBron James. You didn't like the decision, yada, all that. You talk about a guy who has not a whiff of controversy around him. Think about LeBron James has been in the spotlight since he was like 15, 16 years old, and has never left it. And that spotlight's only gotten bigger. And he has not a whiff of controversy on him, has done a lot of great things. And it's just, I wonder how Michael Jordan would have handled this. Because this is not easy. Even sometimes I look at it with players, and like sometimes I feel bad as a guy who reports on it. Like I'm like, man, like do we really need to be? And like think about it too, Danny. Like you weren't wrong to do it, and we weren't wrong to scrutinize it. But think about a couple years ago when we're making a year ago, because it feels like a couple years ago at this point, when we're killing Joel Embiid for going into a friggin' Shake Shack after a game that they had won, and we're killing them for it. Mm-hmm. But think about that. Think about how far this has come. That's what we kill guys for. Like Michael Jordan's at a hotel in a casino after he's down 2-0 in a series, and we're killing Joel Embiid for eating a cheeseburger. It's just, I just don't know how well Michael Jordan wouldn't have social media.
He wouldn't have social media. He wouldn't even be on Twitter or Instagram, or have it privately run where they posted like all of his stuff for him or something like that.
He might have that. No, he might, because like Nike might have made him do that at some point. You know what I mean? Like that might have been the thing, but it wouldn't have been him.
Man, you bring up Nike. You talk about stuff that almost never happened. Can we talk about the Adidas perspective of like, we don't have a shoe, get away? Like Michael's agent is trying to reach out to Adidas to get a feel of like which teams which organizations might be interested and companies might be interested in bringing them on, and they're like, we don't have a shoe, get away. But shout out to Michael's mom for making him take that Nike meeting. You heard David Falk in the show talk about the fact that they were hoping to sell, what was it, like 12 million shoes or something, in his
first 4 years or something.
Yeah. And he sells 126 million in his first
year. Yeah. Crazy.
Like, man, unbelievable. But I think the thing that I'm still trying to come to grips with, when you think about what we talked to Coach Lynham about, and the fact that he says he shouldn't have traded Charles Barkley because you just don't trade a super, and to see how great he was, and to see the Sixers once again getting dunked on by Jordan with Ron Anderson in the wrong place at the wrong time. Did you see that? He's like, Jordan's like spread eagle flying through the air over Ron Anderson standing
and those
on the ground.
ugly uniforms, dude. And those uniforms just rub salt in the wounds. They were so ugly with the stars like dangling. Oh, I don't know what the hell they were.
So, man, his dominance and the way he controlled the Eastern Conference for so long after that Pistons triumph, from that early 90s, like he was the 90s, man. Like he was the 90s. And I don't know, man. I look at, this is called The Last Dance, and I think he was 34 in that last season. Maybe he was 36.
I'm not sure. I think he might have been closer to 34 because then he took another 2 or 3 years off and then came back with the Wizards when he was like 38, I think.
But they screwed that up, man. Like royally. Like that. Think of like we talked about it with people who know, with PJ Carlissimo and Jim Lynham, but just to think that going into that last season, he's at arguably still his prime and has to walk away from the game. Like that's where this all ends. Like he's not playing anymore after 98. Like he doesn't play and then goes into a front office somewhere. It's just unfathomable that he was forced, or I guess it was some of his choice as well, because he didn't want to play if it wasn't with Phil, but just not in position to continue. Okay, not in position to continue to play. Yeah. It's just unbelievable, man. Politics.
No, it's the Jerry Krause thing is just I just wish he was here. It blows your mind.
I wish he was here. I wish he was here to be able to give some perspective.
Yeah, I know. Same. I know Casey Johnson, who covers the Bulls for NBC Sports Chicago. So Jerry Krause apparently had unpublished memoirs that Jerry Krause's family has actually given to Casey Johnson. He's been slowly releasing them, and there's some, if that's one of those, if you want to get, which you should, which we all should get the other side of things. That's a good way to look at it. Casey does an excellent job covering the Bulls. He was all over all their hirings recently, but I just when you go back to the sneaker thing and how Michael wanted to be with Adidas, and think we'd all be wearing shell tops right now if that.
Oh my gosh! Michael's mom is actually the founder of Nike. She's the founder of Nike.
Seriously though, right?
You thought, what if he never goes there and signs with he wanted to be with Adidas. That's who he wanted to be with, and they're like, we don't have a shoe. Sorry,
we don't have a shoe right now.
Oh my gosh!
And it is crazy, because. Obviously you're much older than me, Danny, so it's a little different.
Shut up.
But I was born in 85, so around that time I was not born yet when Michael's first shoe came out in 84. So it's weird for me to think about the fact that Nike wasn't Nike yet. You know what I mean? I grew up with Nike always being the basketball shoe. And it wasn't Converse was the basketball shoe. And Adidas was the bigger company. And I remember watching the Bo Jackson 30 for 30, and Reebok was the company then. And Bo Jackson, his cross trainer helped give them a boost too. Nike, that is. So Bo Jackson and Michael Jordan, kind of made Nike what they are. They weren't the brand. And then for me growing up, Nike was always the brand. And Reebok was only the brand because they had Allen Iverson to me. Otherwise I could care less about Reebok. And then even Adidas, I had Kobe's, than when he was with Adidas, which is funny enough that Kobe first was with Adidas and then switched to Nike. But yeah, it's so weird to think how little things like that, like you said, if he doesn't take that meeting, how many things are different.
One thing about Reebok, I had a pair of the pumps. That was a big deal for
the pumps,
me.
Okay.
Yeah, like because D Brown won the
dunk contest,
and he pumped up his shoe with the oh my. He pumped up before he dunked. Like, it was a big deal. So I had a pair of the pumps, but I had to save up for those. They were like $85. That was like a big coup for me. I couldn't wait to get on the basketball court with those. But you bring up Reebok, and I mentioned that Reebok story. You got to go to the 92 Dream Team. Here's Michael Jordan. And I know you're a Nike athlete, but to me, like, it was an extension of his competitiveness that he wouldn't let that warm-up thing just slide. Like, I'm looking at the doc. I'm like, it seems like everybody was on board with it. Like, there's other people signed to other, organizations and endorsements and things like that. But he took it so personal that Reebok had the sponsorship. So he puts the American flag, which is obviously an iconic photo now. And from a Reebok perspective, a sponsorship, like, what can you say? Like, he had the American flag on his shoulder, so it's not like you can say, oh, he was blocking our logo, or like your hands are tied in that aspect. You know what I'm saying?
And he said it. He's like, wait till they see, wait did these MFers see what I got?
But what I'm getting, Michael is so petty. That is just so petty. Like, it's just something you wouldn't think, like, in a gold medal situation where there's so many other things to think about. He's like, get this Reebok logo off my shoulder. So
I gotta be honest with you, like, I love it.
The pettiness.
I think honestly, I think competitive people are like that. I think a lot of competitive people are just petty, man. Like, they don't want to give you an inch. Like, they want to take everything. And like,
and he's a
don't
sore
get me wrong.
loser. He's a sore loser.
Oh, absolutely. But that's, again, most competitive people are very sore losers. And don't get me wrong, like, if I hate dealing with people like that, but at the same time watching it, I enjoy it from afar. But yeah, if I have to deal with a human like that in real life, I don't care for it.
Patrick Ewing walks into the locker room to congratulate the man on beating them in the game, winning the series, and he just goes and said, "Yeah, I had to." Or no, that was his last game in MSG. That wasn't a playoff game, but just congratulate him on winning the game, and he's like, "Yeah, we had to whoop y'all ass again. I had to take it back to 84." Like what? Like, bro, I'm just coming to dap you up, man. Like, the game's over. Like, but I mean, just overwhelming competitiveness, and it's going to be great to hear from Mike Tollin and get some perspective on how the documentary is put together. And ESPN moved the documentary up. They're still finishing up several episodes. Do you feel like, when you look at what happened and how things are now, is this Bulls team to you better than that 73-win Warriors team, or any of those Warriors teams? Like, that comparison has been made, that the Bulls and the Warriors, the style and the play and things like that. Did you have any perspective on that?
I don't, because I'll tell you,
okay.
I shouldn't say I don't have any perspective on it. I do have perspective on it, but I can't give you a straight answer on who I think would win because of how the game evolved. And to the Warriors' credit, they were and Steph and Clay, they were a huge part of why the game changed to a 3-point oriented game. So, but my thing is this: I think that if you put Michael and Scottie in this era, they would have taken more threes. You know what I mean? And they would have made that a bigger part of the game, knowing that it had become a bigger part of the game. And we've seen, like, I think that Blazer series, I think he shot like 45% from three or something ridiculous like that. So it's not like he wasn't capable. It's just that wasn't the game then. It was played differently. The long twos weren't a thing then. They were a thing then. They aren't a thing now. So I think that they would have adapted because they were so great. They would have been able to adapt and figure it out. You would have got, like, guys like Steve Kerr would have had a bigger role. John Paxson would have had a bigger role. Like, guys that could shoot the three. And then if you put the Warriors in that era, in the Bulls era, I think Steph was so great at what he did, the way he's able to handle the ball, the way he's able to do things. He still would have been great in that era too. And even Clay, like, yeah, maybe the threes wouldn't have been as big of a thing, but, like, he would have just killed you with mid-range twos all day. So I don't like to give a perspective on who I think would win, just because I think the game is they're almost playing like two different sports when you look at it back in history. So I don't know who would have the easier time adjusting to each era. So I'm just going to stay out of the who I think is the greatest for each era, and I'm not separating them.
You know why? And like you said, it was two different leagues. But you know what the difference was, I think, is Kobe said it when he talked about the fact that he was, 19 in the All-Star game, and he's playing against, like, it was an older league then. So Mike's like in his 30s, and the league itself was older. Players stayed with teams longer, and you saw previously in the series about the Scottie Pippen deal where he signs for 7 years with the team. So when you're talking about a 26, 27, 25-year-old guys going against 33, 34-year-old guys, you can see the muscle on somebody, got the lean muscle on a lot of – it's just a different caliber of player. I think that – is it a sturdier player or a player who has more endurance? I'm not sure, but I think defensively and the grown man strength of the Bulls, I can just see a difference in the the babyface Steph and Clay, and Draymond is really young and whatnot. I just see a difference in those players.
But to flip that, yeah. Look at the athleticism. Like, good luck, like Steve Kerr trying to guard Steph Curry. Like, that's not going to happen.
They wouldn't.
And
do
just
that.
And stuff like that. But just like now, the way the game is played, where one of the things the Warriors did so well, aside from shooting, was defense and their ability to switch everything. When you look at Clay, Iguodala, Draymond Green, those guys just switch everything, and all three are above average to elite defenders. So what they were able to do defensively is to me is almost equally as even they had a guy like JaVale McGee protecting the rim too. So to your point, I do hear you. Like, it was more of a grown man's league. The physicality was much greater. They didn't call a lot of stuff. I see sometimes I see a highlight, even Michael Jordan, who got a lot of calls. I'll see it. I'm like, damn, how was that not a foul? Just because I see so much of today's game. But in the converse, like, a guy like Draymond Green would have thrived in that era. And he would have, to get back, seriously, like, how good would he have been? He would have
in my head, I just see him kicking people in the balls. Like, I just see him just like boom, boom. But I agree with you. And you look at the daggone Knicks Bulls series, you just get up and can shove dudes. It's not a flagrant or a tech or anything.
It's like hockey.
Just break it up. You just break it up and move on. It just brought back so much of that intensity, man, because, I think that I hated the Knicks because they were foils to the Sixers, and I was a big Michael Jordan fan. So seeing the intensity of those series and the fact that the Knicks were always so good and always like restock their players really frustrated me. And man, it just brought back some crazy memories and of the intensity.
They had
and
some
the
nasty customers, man. The Knicks, like Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley. I mean,
Xavier
Starks.
McDaniel.
Yeah, dude, they had some nasty customers. I mean that as a compliment. Like, they were just they were tough dudes, man. Like, they would literally fight you on the court and not think twice.
Yeah, Derek Harper, another guy. I just looking back on it, man, I think someone I saw on social media, if the Bad Boy Pistons and those Knicks went up against each other, it'd been like ambulances hanging outside, right? Yeah.
It would have been fun.
But a lot of fun for us to talk about this series. We're continuing to bring you, people who you think who you will want to hear from, particularly with perspective from PJ Carlesimo and the Dream Team, and Jim Lynam gets going against those Bulls in the 90s and some of the experiences he's had. But have a listen to Michael Barkann and Mike Tollin just dissecting what it's been like to this point, talking about this this Last Dance series and what it's taken to get to this point and bring it to fruition. Here he is.
Danny and Paul, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to introduce right now the pride of Haverford High School. That's right. He's a Philadelphia area guy and now out in Los Angeles, went to Stanford University, has produced such films and shows as Arliss, as Radio, as Summer Catch, and many more that we can tell you about, and maybe we will tell you about. Mike Tollin joins us now. And the reason he's with us, Michael, great to see you. It's because you are the executive producer on the documentary series on ESPN about to enter parts 5 and 6 this Sunday called The Last Dance. To be able to get a hold of you for this was just awesome. I was so thrilled that we were going to be able to talk. Tell us, when you look at, you got the okay for this project, Mike, in 2016. The news release went out in 2018, and here we are in 2020 watching The Last Dance. Tell us how this all came together.
Well, the footage was shot in 97, 98 when facing their an opportunity to win their 6th title in 8 years. The Bulls were, let's just say there was a little dissension in the ranks, as viewers have already seen. When the general manager says to the coach, you could go 82-0 and it'll still be your last year. So that was Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson. And Phil just declares this is the last dance. And NBA Entertainment says, we got to shoot this because this is a once in a lifetime. This is a generational team. You could argue the 60s Celtics versus the 90s Bulls, 2 greatest dynasties in NBA history. So Adam Silver, who was the president of NBA Entertainment then, goes to Reinsdorf and Krause and Jackson, and they all say yes. And then finally, he goes to Michael and says, if you let us film the season, we won't do anything with it until we have some kind of mutual understanding. So we won't arrange a distribution deal. We won't go out to anywhere without your authorization. At the very least, you have the greatest home movies ever. So Michael says, yeah. And it sits on the shelf. And every year he says no as he comes back to play with the Wizards. There's the Hall of Fame. He's now owning the Hornets. And, life is just going on, and Michael's too busy and doesn't really want to deal with it. I always knew about the footage. It was always this, the treasure trove, like the little known secret, but eventually somebody was going to unlock it. And it got to 2016, and all of a sudden people were consuming documentaries in multi-part, long-form series, and I figure I'll go back to Michael and his team and say, let's do this as a big event. Let's do this as a 10-part series. 4 years later, here we are. No sweat, right?
No sweat, and not at all. It's amazing, and that's the other question I have for you. I've got millions of them, obviously, but I'm thinking every Sunday night through May, which is great, and then the previous 2 episodes there, and then you got the new ones, and I feel like I'm getting ready for Monday Night Football, man, watching this thing. And I got my son who's 19, and he really has no memory of Michael Jordan. He was 3 when Michael Jordan retired, for goodness sakes. Maybe he was even 2. I got my daughter's boyfriend. I got my son's fraternity brother. Right. We're all sheltering in place together, waiting for this thing. Why not do it successive nights, 10 straight nights, and leave everybody tongue wagging that way?
Well, kind of because we couldn't, because as you may remember, this was slated for a June 2nd premiere. So when the world stopped spinning on Friday the 13th, March 13th, all of a sudden there's a clamor. It starts on social media, and there's a little groundswell of like, we have no sports. The NBA's been shut down. The NCAA, the March Madness is not going to happen. What a great time for this Michael Jordan piece, because we've been promoting it to come out in June. And so we have this hurry up emergency conference call on Monday, the 16th of March. ESPN, Netflix, Jump Inc., Jordan's Company, the NBA, Mandalay Sports Media, the director, Jason Hare, the edit team, everybody. And we see this opportunity and we look at it and we go, we got to take advantage of it. But we're still making the shows. We got 6 in the can. We have 7, 8, 9, and 10 in various states of incompletion. And so we say, give us a day and we'll come back to you with a schedule, with a plan, with like what's doable. And it became clear it was going to take us till roughly May 15th to be done. So they back-timed it from May 17th as the last airing. And if we do it only 2 a week, we could start it as soon as April 19th. It was just logistics and math and doing the best we could. But Michael, it's like nothing I've ever done. I mean, we got some shows that worked, some that didn't, some that were panned, some that critics liked. I've never had a show where they thank us, where people say, like you did, man, my whole family can't wait till Sunday night. My wife never watches a basketball game, but she loves these characters and she's so into it. It's such an incredible ride, I gotta say.
Did you sit in on all of the interviews or selected?
Well,
so what was that like?
There's 106 guys, 105 one-offs, 106. Well, we got 10 hours to fill. All right, it's a lot of airtime. We did Michael 3 times, so really 108 interviews. I sat in on all the 3 with Michael. I was at Barkley. No, I was not at Barkley. Barkley, I was working on Charles Forever. We got to get Charles. Couldn't go because it ended up being in Atlanta. Sat in on Rodman and Kerr and Phil Jackson in Montana. The interviews with Michael were, really the backbone. 3 interviews, roughly 8 hours of content. The first one was more than 3 hours long. So Jason Hare, the director, is very thorough, very big on research, on preparation. He comes to play, and we're all there on pins and needles because, let's face it, until Michael sits in that chair and starts talking and we see, is he really into this? Is this really happening or not? So one of the first indicators, which you saw in the first episode, Jason reads him this quote about the early Bulls being the flying cocaine circus. Now, Michael Jordan, the player in the 90s, would roll his eyes and laugh and say, oh yeah, that's funny. Next. He leans in, as you heard, and said, first of all, I never heard that. So now Jason's credentials are established, like he's digging deep and finding stuff Michael didn't even know about. And then he goes into this great detail about knocking on the hotel room door, and there are the lines, and there's, chapter and verse of what was in front of him and how he stayed away from it. So then we realized if Michael said yes after saying no for all these years, it's not just an impulse. He's thought it through. He's at the stage in his life where he's ready to kind of, debunk and demystify and tell the real stories. He's ready to be reflective. He's ready to be emotional. I think maybe the most heartening thing about people's reaction is they're saying, wow, I'm seeing a side of Michael Jordan I've never seen before.
Yeah, I agree. And you hear the murmurs before it came out. And one of them that I had heard was, you know what, you're just going to put him in a different light. It wasn't said complimentary. And so far, through 4 episodes, I think he looks pretty good. Look, I wasn't thrilled with his Hall of Fame speech. I wasn't thrilled with a couple of things that he did at the end of his career. But this, I love the cigar too, sitting right there.
Yes.
I don't know if that's bourbon or scotch, but he's got it right there, and it's neat, which is really cool. 3 interviews with Michael Jordan. That's amazing. How did you keep the lid on so much of this stuff? Is like you look at the episode with Isaiah Thomas, and that's one of the reasons I never could stand Isaiah Thomas, because I watched those conference championship games between the Bulls and the Pistons. I saw Michael Jordan shake Isaiah Thomas's hand when the Bulls lost all those series, and then they walk off losers and they just bypass them. And it always made me sick to my stomach. And now Isaiah's trying to play it off like, oh man, I didn't even know. But how do you keep a lid on all that stuff?
Well, you say keep a lid on it. Everything we do is privacy protected. There's 10,000 hours of footage. So if you're trying to pirate some of this footage, you'd have a hard time sorting through it. And look, we've learned through the years, you have to be really careful. You don't mind leaking out a little bit. There's been promotions on this thing for 2 years. So we're trying to tease, and we're trying to let people know, hey, we got Obama. Hey, we got Clinton. Hey, we got Magic. Hey, we got Phil, Dennis, Scotty, Steve Kerr. We got everybody. I don't know. It just was a process. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of chefs in the kitchen. There was an awful lot of scrutiny on a project this high profile, a lot of personalities, a lot of agendas. But the best part about it was when we saw the opportunity in front of us, it's like the 2-minute drill. All right, we got no timeouts. We got no huddles. We got only the A-list plays. Everybody's got to be digging in. The team came together in such amazing fashion, and the way Jason orchestrated this, taking the hard drives, editors going to their apartments, cobbling together from 6 different sources. It's really a wonderful team. We had this great Zoom, no red carpet premieres, obviously. You don't even, after 4.5 years, we don't even get to walk down a red carpet and take some photos and have a cocktail. So we did a Zoom, and everybody's on this thing, all the producers from all the different camps, and all of a sudden Bob Iger, the head of the Disney company, comes on, and Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, comes on, and Michael Jordan comes on. It was a extraordinary outpouring of mutual respect and gratitude and excitement about what we were bringing to the world.
If you had to describe to someone who had yet to see the first two installments of this, how would you describe what it is? Is it about Michael Jordan? Is it about that last season of the Bulls? Is it about the relationships that Phil Jackson has with the team members? There's so much going on.
Yeah, all the above. Great question. And that was the big challenge, to juggle all of those perspectives, all of those agendas. We say it's 10 hours chronicling the greatest player ever to play the game and one of the great dynasties ever in NBA history. It's I think, equal parts Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. We do deep backstories, as you've seen a little bit already. Obviously, Michael, Scotty in episode 3, Scotty in episode 2, Dennis in episode 3, Phil in episode 4. A little gem that we're saving till episode 9, just in case your viewers were going to quit early. We do the Steve Kerr backstory in episode 9. Now, Steve Kerr was just, you could say, a bit part player, right? But he was kind of the next generation to John Paxson. Michael always needed a guy that he had confidence in and could trust to knock down the big three when they're double teaming him. Paxson won, that early championship game against the Lakers to win their first title. Steve Kerr hits big shots in the 97 and 98 playoffs. But what people don't know is that he got a black eye from a fight he had with Michael Jordan in practice. And he talks about how, in a way, that did wonders for their relationship, because he stood up to Michael and he confronted him afterwards, and they had it out, and Michael earned a respect for him. And he actually thinks it carried over to his confidence in him on the court. And then we get into Steve's backstory. I don't know if your viewers are aware, because it's so long ago, but Steve's dad was the president of American University in Beirut, Lebanon, and was assassinated when Steve was in college. So like he and Michael have that tragedy in common of losing their father. But he goes through what that was like, and we interview his mom, and he's just such a great, open, wonderful human who has such a great, having been Michael's teammate on the Bulls that set the record with 72 wins, and then having been the coach of the Warriors that broke the record with 73 wins, he's obviously got a lot of perspective on the whole thing.
Yeah, tell me that the video includes the fight between Jordan and Kerr, because we've so long heard that story. If you remember anything about those Bulls teams, tell me, Michael, that you have the 1-2.
Michael, I'll tell you anything you want, but I think that's in episode 11. I'm not sure.
No, okay. You know what? I'm going to wait for 11. I get that. That's a director's track copy. Yes. Yeah.
There you go.
I'm looking.
There's
I'm
a lot of good
forward.
stuff, though. Plenty of picking on Scotty Burrell. Scotty's sort of the whipping boy, but it all comes to fruition when Scotty has his big game in the 98 playoffs. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Being from Philadelphia area, as mentioned, you went to Haverford High School. You were a proud Ford. What are your recollections? Well, I guess you might have been out of town by the time
I was.
Michael Jordan's career.
Look,
Michael,
really not to date myself, but I'm old enough to have been there in '67 when the Sixers went 68-13 and finally Wilt beat Bill Russell. Oh man, the days in Convention Hall when the Celtics would get the insurmountable lead and Red Auerbach would light up a victory cigar on the bench. Must be hard for kids today. Like, you can't smoke anywhere in public. Red Auerbach was lighting a cigar on the bench while the game was still going on. We're throwing stuff at him, and he became our arch enemy number one. Was there in '83. In the '90s when this was going on, the Sixers weren't really competitive. It wasn't until Croce and Larry and AI got the team together in '01.
Well, they weren't going against Michael Jordan. They had Charles and Jerminski and Johnny Dawkins and Hersey Hawkins. They had some talent. It was always the Bulls knocking them off.
Right. Here's what's really cool, though. In the early episodes, when Michael comes in and they say, "What are your goals?" and he says, "I just want the Bulls to be considered among the great NBA teams." And he says, "The Lakers, the Celtics, and the Sixers." And then you realize the timeline. He's saying that in '84 because we had just won with the 4-5-4 Moses Malone, Dr. J team. So nice to be nice to be mentioned in that company.
Yeah, I know you interviewed Kobe as well for this. Kobe was an arch rival, certainly by high school affiliation, as Haverford and Lower Merion are rivals. But what was that like? And just kind of the wistfulness now when you think of the fact that he's gone.
Well, it's what was it like then and what is it like now looking back on it. I knew Kobe a little bit. As you said, he went to Haverford's rival, Lower Merion. Obviously, we were quite a few years apart, so we weren't actually, going head to head. We met early on. He was interested in being involved in the project, and we said, well, you're certainly an important part of the storytelling. So we interviewed him about 6 months ago, and he was so incredibly respectful of Michael. Jason Hare at one point talks about how Michael won 6 and you won 5, sort of trying to, kind of get a little something out of him. And Kobe just said, look, what you see from me is what I got from him. And he talks openly about Michael being his big brother. You fast forward after the tragedy, the big event at Staples Center where Michael did the eulogy and wept openly and talks about how Kobe was his little brother. So it's so validating. When you see the episode, which is this coming Sunday, episode 5, we dedicate the episode to Kobe. And it's the 98 All-Star game, which was Michael's last as a Bull and Kobe's first as an 18-year-older on the Lakers. And they're already trash talking, and they're already going head to head. And Kobe's already trying to be like Mike, but it's really charming. And there's a moment at the end that, like in the context of what has happened, is just chilling. It goes on. It's a great episode. I think we really start to hit our stride. It goes on to the Dream Team, that incredible team in Barcelona with Magic and Larry and Charles, where they really pass the baton and kind of acknowledge that Michael's the best player in the game now. And then we get into the gambling. It was very important for us to be able to address the kind of hot button topics. So we talk about the gambling accusations. We talk about the conspiracy theories and his dad's untimely death. And, I think nothing was off limits.
That's fantastic. 2 more for you, my friend. And the first of those is, you mentioned Michael Jordan, the greatest player to ever play, and you're from Philadelphia, and everyone was screaming, no, how could you do that to Wilt Chamberlain? Would you like to amend that statement?
It's kind of an asterisk, Michael, like at sort of prehistoric times. I mean, Wilt averaged 50 points a game for a whole season. Like, I know. Just off the board. I mean, okay. I mean, I'm friends with Bill Simmons, who's the Boston guy, right? He's already trashed Wilt in his book of basketball, made the case that Russell was better than Wilt. I'll just say he's largely considered the greatest basketball player, and we'll take Wilt. But you know what's funny about that? You got 3 generations. You got Wilt, you got Dr. J, you got Allen. Allen's kind of my favorite. He didn't win the title for us, but he was so ferocious, and I taught my kids to appreciate the NBA by watching the little guy, right? He'd just get knocked down and he'd get up. And I mean, even 01, it's kind of like the 93 Phillies. It ends with the Joe Carter homer and we don't win. 01 ends losing 4-1 to the Lakers, but like the Tyrone Lue, the 46 points in game 1, the ferocity of that team, it's kind of my favorite of all.
Yeah, I hear you. For many of us here too as well. Lastly, more general, what is the story of this quarantine, of this pandemic, that you would tell from a sports perspective? Is there something that leaps out at you, Mr. Filmmaker?
Wow. I've already seen they're doing a documentary on it. I'm not. Look, I'd like to think the story we're going to want to tell is how sports brought the country back together. I go back to, I guess it was the Wednesday, March 11th, when Rudy Gobert is diagnosed positive. It kind of felt like Adam Silver was leading the country. I guess that's really the story, is that sports took a leadership role, canceled the NBA season, they canceled March Madness. Whoa, this is serious, right? And I hope now, as the conversations continue, that Adam's going to find a way to finish off this season, that Rob's going to figure out a way in whatever format to start the baseball season and lead us to a World Series. And the football season is almost certainly going to start, in my opinion. And then we'll have the 2 quarterback controversy to worry about in Philadelphia.
Yes, we will. Believe me, it's begun, as I'm sure you know. And already It hurts.
Amazing.
Okay. Mike, thanks so much for joining us, as always. Congratulations on your career, but certainly what you've done with The Last Dance. All of you, your partners, your co-executive producers, and your director, Jason Heyer, who awesome job. And we look forward to see the rest of it coming up.
Thanks, Michael. It's always great to see you.
Back at you, buddy. Talk soon. The great Mike Tollin.
Man, thankful to have Mike Tollin and Michael Barkann chopping up this series, because we are just all thankful to have a little piece of basketball that we can talk about and review. I mean, look at the way social media. I mean, I know a lot of our threads are all like sports people and of people of that ilk, but man, if you look down your timeline, it's just perspectives and thoughts and just interesting, people just talking about Michael Jordan's 90s fits, which are just funny to see. And
a lot of bagginess.
A lot of bagginess, man. And we haven't even talked about Ahmad Rashad, a guy who, I mean, somebody we're hoping to try to get on the podcast, but
former Sixer Ahmad Rashad.
Right. Played for the Sixers for a brief moment in a preseason game as part of like a promotion. And, a guy people don't remember, was a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL as a wide receiver. And, have to have a second incarnation like that as a broadcaster, which I always think is cool. A little bitter about that because he had 2 careers where I'm just trying to master one, but just so cool, just getting the perspective and, tough watching some of the people who aren't here who are, featured in the documentary as well. But what do you think of Ahmad Rashad? Were you an NBA Inside Stuff guy?
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always found it so crazy. Like, I can't remember what age I was when my dad told me, like, yeah, he's a former football player. I'm like, what former football player?
Like, no way.
Why is he doing this? But
Right.
he was great at it though. He was so great for that show, and the show was amazing growing up. I just nothing but fond memories watching NBA Inside Stuff growing up.
They dusted off Willow Bay. I don't know if you remember her.
I saw that. Yeah, I did.
They dusted her off. I'm like, man, she looks great for however old she is. But haven't been around as long as she has in the industry. But hey, man, we're going to continue to pump you full of knowledge, perspectives on this Michael Jordan Last Dance, particularly from the Sixers as well, because they were on the receiving end of a lot of these beatings from Michael, unfortunately, and we have to relive a lot of it as we look through the years as Michael flexes his mighty might against us. Any last thoughts, Paul, before we talk about the website?
Yeah, just again, the biggest thing I've found, and again, not only through this documentary, but just in general, all these little connections and all this stuff. It's that to me has been like, if I've learned or kind of really something has really stuck with me through this, even this quarantine time in general, just man, thinking of like we all have them in our professional lives and even our personal lives, all these like 6 degrees of separation with all these people. And we've experienced it as we're trying to get guests on the show and everything. And we're so lucky to have someone like Jim Lynam at our disposal and Mark Jackson and guys like that. But it's so cool to just see how sports and how specifically in this case basketball has connected everybody. It's been a positive in a time where we haven't had a lot of positives.
I would like to talk a little more about Isaiah Thomas on the next podcast.
Sure.
Just to get a little bit more in depth on how he suddenly, I don't know if we'll get into the next podcast, but I don't know if he's coming out in a better light or worse light. I'm curious to get how you thought about that, but we will save that for the next podcast because we appreciate you guys listening as always. Danny Pommells and Paul Hudrick here on Sixers Talk, brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU works. We appreciate you downloading the podcasts and all the 5-star ratings, comments, thoughts, and suggestions. Keep them coming. For Paul, I'm Danny. Our esteemed producer, Ben Barry. We will see you next time.